Ladies and gentlemen, hello! Welcome for our first talk of the afternoon in the master stage. We are going to welcome SmartSuite on stage to talk about the future of enterprise in NoCode. For that, please welcome the CEO and founder of SmartSuite, John Derbyshire, and Jonathan Ruff, VP of Cyber and Information Risk at Apple Bank. Give them a warm welcome, please.
Thank you. You hear me okay? All right, just make sure. It's a pleasure to be here today. We're going to have the opportunity to kind of talk through just the market in the no-code space and just give a little bit of history on SmartSuite and what we do. But the main conversation is going to be with a VP from Apple Bank that has purchased the SmartSuite technology at the enterprise level. And we're going to have a conversation around a number of questions related to how and why the bank decided to do that as well. So let's just jump right in. Again, my name's John Derbyshire. I'm co-founder and CEO of SmartSuite. I want to kick things off by really just talking about the no-code, low-code space, kind of what that means, how the different products begin to fit into that. Talk a little bit about the origin story of SmartSuite, of where it kind of came from, the idea. I think it's important for each of the no-code vendors have a different perspective that they came from and the products that they built to solve different problems. So we're going to share our perspective and where SmartSuite is coming from. We're going to talk just briefly about the mission and vision of SmartSuite so you understand who we are, and then we're going to spend the bulk of the time with Jonathan here in a question and answer section. Okay. So let's just start with the no-code space that's here. This slide isn't meant to cover everybody that's in the space. It's really meant just to say there's a lot of categories in the no-code space. What's interesting that's happened just in the last 12 years is that there's been this influx of new products that have begun to move into space to solve different problems, but all have this unique idea around no-code. The ability for regular everyday users, sometimes called citizen developers that have process knowledge to be able to build things, make things on their own without the need for IT. What's interesting about this entire category is that many of the products in this category have integrations between the various products that are here. And no-code is becoming known as an integration or a connector type of product category in itself, in that you're not buying a point solution. In many cases, you're buying a solution that can connect with 15, 20, 30 other products in the same category. So that's what begins to make no-code so interesting to so many people, is the ease of use and the ease of integration, those two features combined. That's there. So if you know me, I'm a big origin person. I like to know how people got started, where your idea came from. I think that really begins to shape the products and services that you offer from your perspective. So I just want to share just a couple of minutes about my perspective, how I got to where I am, which is really a focus on business processes. I'm a business process person. When I think about things or have conversations with people in my mind, I'm beginning to break that down and think about how does that process begin to work for you. So my story really begins at Ernst & Young. At a pretty young age, I had the chance to be a partner, run one of their global consulting practices. I had the chance to travel the world, meet with customers, and talk about mainly cybersecurity at the time and how cybersecurity was beginning to become an element that every Fortune 100 company needed to deal with that was there. But what was interesting for me is that's when I got my first big dose of process. Everything at Ernst & Young is a process. Every customer that you go to, you think about the process, you come back, you update the processes or the work aids for the organization. So the next client that anybody in the world goes to, you have what's called a best-in-class process. So everything that I did over the 4.5 years that I was at Ernst & Young was about capturing data from all the customers that we visit around the world, understanding how they solve processes, good and bad, and then sharing that information back in a non-competitive way with other businesses to help them kind of move to a baseline of a best-in-class type of process. I had the opportunity to leave Ernst & Young and start a company called Archer Technologies. This was in 2000. This was my first entry into the no-code space. We built a product, well, I'll give you the problem first. So mainly large banks around the world had an issue with bringing online banking to market. They didn't know the systems, the people, the processes, the technologies, the apps that needed to be secured in order to actually bring that to market. And at Ernst & Young, I had the ability to meet with so many different customers and keep hearing this problem over and over and over, and we would bring a service to bear, and that we would come and we would test things. We'd go away from 6 months and give them a list of findings. We'd come back in 6 months, we'd do the same testing again. So the thought process behind Archer Technologies was, what if that was just a process? Just like accounts receivable, payroll, HR is a process, what if you could manage governance, risk, and compliance as a process? So I spent 3 to 4 months kind of locked up in a room just trying to think through what that process would look like. I had a moment one day where I said, I figured it out. How these different elements fit together across a large organization. I then took that idea to a company named EDS. EDS was about 100,000 employees, mainly consultants around business transformation. They had just won a contract with General Motors to outsource all IT assets and functions at General Motors. So they had a need to understand and apply GRC in that business. So we approached them, had a floppy disk, didn't even have any code written, gave them that floppy disk. So I went and met with the board, put that in, showed them, hey, here's how all these pieces fit together. And obviously they said, we want to buy that. I said, well, that's great. We haven't written our first line of code, so we're going to go get started right away. But what was interesting at that point was that they signed a 3-year contract for about $1 million a year to build a piece of software that they hadn't even seen yet. They just saw a prototype in HTML that was there. So we hired developers at that point and started to build the product. And this is where I began to get my education for NoCode. We built the product, let's say we had a record with different field types, and every time I would visit EDS, which was every week, they would say, could you change this drop-down list to a list of radio buttons, this text field to a text area? Could you add this date field in this location and move it on this place on the form? And every time I would go back to our developers, we would make those changes. And after a couple months, we said, wait a minute, there has to be a better way to solve this problem with them. So we thought about what we didn't call NoCode at the time, which is let's let the customers have a template to start with for a best-in-class process. Let's give them all the fields of information. Let's do all the connections, the linkages between the different types of data. But let's allow them to add their own data structures. So we had 10 to 12 field types at that time that allowed you to do that. But let's let you have different display types for each field. Sounds pretty simple, but in the case of EDS, it was something that was changing every week as they were iterating through how they were going to have tens of thousands of people interact with this software and how they wanted to be presented back. So my background in the kind of moving forward from that point was all about no code as a single code base inside of an organization to manage a process around GRC. Fast forward to 2008 or 9, 29 of the top 30 financial services companies in the US were customers, 75 of the Fortune 100 were customers. Like that product really took off, became a unicorn. I think it was Morgan Stanley that I visited in 2008, and they had called and said, hey, we want you to come out to the bank and understand all the different ways that we're using the product and the technology that you built. And we had 9 core solutions that were part of Archer at that time. And what we found was that the bank was using us in the IT group to build what they called on-demand applications, other processes or workflows inside of the bank that the bank had a need for. So they weren't buying point solutions, or they weren't creating their own code. They were using the Archer platform to actually do that. So the vision for Archer began to change in 2008 or 9 to say, hey, we want to begin to move forward to manage any business process in an organization using our technology. What happened over the next year was we had some offers to sell the company that we couldn't pass up, so we sold the company in 2010. The day after we sold, the CEO of the company that acquired us, which was EMC, that's now part of Dell Technologies, came to visit and said, we're not interested in any of these on-demand applications for anything outside of what the RSA division inside of EMC does. So they wanted to take our vision of here and make it just this big. And the reason for that was they owned a company called Documentum that they felt that competed with, right? So fast forward a few years, like that's always been in the back of my mind that we wanted to help manage any business process using a no-code platform, really have a single place for organizations to be able to run their business on one core platform, not the only platform, but one core platform that's there. So that began to be the genesis of SmartSuite as we know it today. So after we sold Archer, I co-founded that with my wife Tara. We started a family foundation. We did a lot of investing in startups, hundreds of startups that we invested in. As I was meeting with founders and beginning to work with them, the common question that came up most of the time was, what products do we need to have in place to help us run our business now across sales, marketing, HR, products, and so, and what products do we need as we begin to scale from tens of users to hundreds to thousands of employees in the organization. So that's the idea for Smart Suite. All right, not hearing me okay? Is that better? All right, sorry. So the mission of Smart Suite is very simple from what I just said. It's the ability to manage any business process or project on a single platform. If you were to take 3 products that are in the space today that you would kind of put together, let me just give you an analogy of what those might be to help you understand what Smart Suite is. So if you took a product like Notion that allows you to write excellent documents in an unstructured capability, almost like a Google Doc type capability. You mirrored that with a Monday.com that was more project management, and then you paired that with something like an Airtable that's more on the database side. Those 3 core technologies are built into Smart Suite by design. We spent the first 2 years as a company working with a large group of developers around the world to build the core technology before we actually released it to our first customer. So this wasn't a let's work for 3 or 6 months and release an MVP and kind of iterate. It was a pretty big lift with all the different pieces that need to be in place that's there. You can kind of see that in the mission here, we're trying to bring together databases, spreadsheets, documents, collaboration, file management, analytics, automation, integration, role-based security, AI, all into one platform. So pretty big lift, takes a pretty large development team to begin to pull all of that off that's there. I don't want to spend too much time here on Smart Suite. I want to get to the fun questions here. But if you want to learn more about what we do, I think there's a session at 3 o'clock that you could attend, a panel discussion where we'll talk a little bit about that. You stop by our booth, and then tomorrow in one of the sessions, we're actually doing kind of a live working session and demo if you'd like to see things live that are there. Okay. All right, I tried to get through this as quickly as I could so we could get to Jonathan Ruff. So Jonathan is a VP at Apple Bank in New York. His background includes JP Morgan Chase, Bank of New York Mellon, and currently Apple Bank. He's kind of a leader in the space of bringing NoCode in at the enterprise level, mainly large financial services company, and we're just going to have a conversation around a number of topics about why he did that, how the bank considered that purchase as they begin to bring in their first kind of no-code product, how they govern and manage that within the organization as well. So here's a list of starter questions that we put together that we'll kind of run through, but there's also going to be some time if you have questions, you'll be able to raise your hand. We'll have somebody run a mic out to you very quickly as well. So sit down here with Jonathan, and let's just start maybe, Jonathan, with probably an easy question of, what was the very first use case for no-code that you saw within Apple Bank, and where did it kind of your journey with Smart Suite begin?
It's working. You just have to speak in the mic. Yep.
Okay, there we go. All right, great. So the notion really came from the marketing department. They needed to begin automating a lot of their solutions. Very manual, email-based spreadsheets, and a lot of things were just getting lost. We became regulated by the CFPB. Therefore, they needed to have a tremendous of interaction with legal and compliance. All right, so this did not work. It really required a very time-consuming process, and there were so many items that got lost in the shuffle. So they came to my department, information security and cyber risk management, and they wanted to understand what they can do. They wanted to bring in a solution that can automate this. And this was a no-code solution. Smart Suite was on the table. I was familiar with them. And really, that's where it started. And at that point, once it was in the bank and users were using it, it just grew exponentially, right? But at the same time, from my organization and through my lens, I had to make sure that we are secure, right? Because I can't have an application in the bank that I'm unaware of or doesn't have the proper monitoring, governance, oversight, and the controls that are required. I mean, we are a financial institution, and there is absolutely no way that we are going to pass the sniff test with the regulators without reviewing this application. So that was essentially the process of Smart Suite coming in.
Yeah, and can you talk about the departments that it began to expand into once it was in marketing?
Absolutely, absolutely. So as I was alluding to before, there is relationships between marketing, compliance, and legal. And as these workflows were being built out and as they were communicating through the platform, compliance realized that they needed a solution that operated in a very similar capacity, but strictly for compliance. So they had the integration with marketing, but now compliance starts to take it on. And I thought that was very interesting. And this is all from an end user perspective, right? So this application, this no-code application that's sitting, in the enterprise, is now starting to gain this unprecedented traction because a lot of the work was done by the business process owners themselves.
Yeah, can you maybe talk just a little bit about who actually configured the processes? What did you go through to actually build out what you needed?
Yeah, a typical deployment of software is going to be a business requirements document, and it's going to probably be outsourced. This was driven by the business. So the actual business itself was building these processes, was building the applications, was building the solutions that they needed. And it was unheard of because the time to market for something like this was extremely long. So to answer your question, it primarily was the business that did it, and that goes against everything from cyber and information risk management perspective. That goes against everything we do. So it was really like, how are we going to ensure that this doesn't become a shadow IT nightmare, right? And really want to get some true governance around it. But it then propelled into legal. So I have lawyers building solutions now, right? They are building solutions to optimize their processes. And as you can imagine, being in a large financial institution, there's a lot of legal work that needs to be done and a lot that could be automated because it needs a lot of collaboration throughout the multiple departments within the bank. Legal is overseeing all of them. This synergy just swept through. So I believe at this point, we're up to about 5 departments utilizing NoCode platform, and we have over 70 users, which is amazing. And we were really, really excited. One of the most interesting parts of this was I got a phone call one day from one of the end users who was building out a solution, and she said, "You know what? This is actually really fun. Like, I'm enjoying this. Like, I'm enjoying building a solution." And I said, "That's incredible. Like, that's fantastic. So keep doing it." And it just organically took off. And it really is just a transformative technology that we, information security, cybersecurity, were able to get comfortable with.
Yep, so you mentioned a topic, shadow IT, that I just wanted to describe for a minute and then let you maybe expand on that, which is, shadow IT is people inside of business units building software that IT is not aware of and doesn't have control around. And in the enterprise, that's something that's pretty new. It's happening kind of at the mid-market in a big way the last couple of years, but what's your thoughts and what was the bank's thoughts around this concept of shadow IT, positive or negative?
Oh, absolutely negative. It was shut down. There was absolutely no way we were going to do shadow IT. There's too much risk, right? Because, I mean, business units were buying things with corporate cards, right? So there was no central inventory of all of these different shadow IT processes. They're spinning up, S3 buckets on AWS and shoving documents in there, and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're regulated. We have 4 top regulated, examiners, and we go through multiple exams every year, and not to be able to identify a system and have it fully vetted in our application inventory is a nightmare, and we would end up getting an issue. So we had to shut that down, basically. And what happened by shutting that down is the business stopped innovating, right? So it really slowed the development and the growth of the business tremendously by shutting this down. So there was a huge opportunity to make business run more efficiently, but it needed to be in a controlled fashion.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit. So maybe the first type is, can you talk about the approval process for just a no-code product in general from your perspective at a large bank and the process that they would need to go through?
Yeah, so a typical onboarding process for a solution, especially a no-code solution, which is very new, to a very conservative bank, is going to go through a vendor risk due diligence process where they're going to have to supply all the required documentation, their SOC 2 Type 2s, any penetration tests. We're going to look at their financials. We're going to, go through the typical screening process that we have to go through as onboarding a vendor. And that also entails our rather lengthy 150 question control survey, right? Which unfortunately has to be done because we need to understand every aspect of it before we can introduce this into the business. And that went through pretty smoothly, which was pretty good. And so that is one of the areas that's directly under me. So we do the vetting of applications. So when this came across the table, we didn't find anything that was alarming. And we were able to get comfort around it really quickly. And we needed to make sure that we didn't have that stigma of shadow IT, right? Because that's frowned upon in any major enterprise, right? You have to have, controls in place, right? If you don't have the controls in place, then you have the risk. If you're measuring your risk appetite, it's always going to be outside of the threshold. So bringing that in was really the magic.
And so I think a lot of people in the room, there's probably some vendors in here that have no-code products that are trying to figure out, do they need SOC 2 compliance to do business at the enterprise level? And what's your thought on that?
It depends. It depends on what vertical you're interested in pursuing. If you're looking to get into the financial industry, absolutely. That is pretty standard. And what it does is basically it's a process that ensures that the controls that are operating within your application are operating effectively. And these are attested to by major accounting firms that will have a stamp of approval and validate the controls. So it's really very important, right? And that's number one. Healthcare, you have to be HIPAA compliant. I'm not sure how that moves through the UK, but you also have to take into consideration GDPR. I know that's a very hot topic right now. So these are some things that are these are all captured within your SOC 2 Type 2. These are captured within your surveys and your different questionnaires. Again, this is not only a risk to the enterprise, but we have a fiduciary responsibility to protect our customers' information. And if this information is getting out into a space where it's unauthorized, we're going to find ourselves in a very bad situation. So legal played a big part in that as well.
Okay, good. So let's talk a little bit about governance, and I think you have a pretty interesting story from your perspective of how you've added products on top of SmartSuite NoCode product that helps maintain and alert you with changes to role-based access that's happening in real time. So can you describe that a little?
Absolutely, yeah, and that was one of the biggest aspects is that we have to have control over who has access to what data within the system. Another requirement, right, that we have, which is not just a company policy, but it is a regulation, is to have multi-factor authentication and single sign-on. So the ability to integrate with Active Directory, currently we also are leveraging Okta for multi-factor authentication, but we'll be transitioning that over to Azure AD with conditional access policy. So that's really how this is now going from an unstructured model to a very structured model where we can still allow the freedom of creating solutions, but we have the controls to ensure and monitor that the right users have the right access to the right data. And that's done through conditional access policies and centralizing the provisioning process. So we have all the benefits of the tool with the proper oversight over one of the first things is going to be authentication, right? We don't want to have anybody accessing the system outside of the bank. This is confidential information that's stored. So we need to have the right access controls, and we need to have the right processes in place for that.
Yep, I think one of the things we talked about earlier that was pretty fascinating to a lot of people was that this product that you have sitting on top of not just SmartSuite in the no-code space, but all of the products that you have in the bank, but allows you to see who has access. You're alerted in real time. Let's say somebody's granted administrator access. You could be alerted and approve or deny that. You could also automatically change that access to what you want on the fly by using their API that's built back into SmartSuite. So it really is real time, and that's what helps you remove this thought of shadow IT, is it's giving you the control over access to data, the governance piece.
Yeah, and everything within that, external shares, external links. So as we transition through the journey of getting off of a data center and going to more SaaS-based applications, we needed to understand the compliance and the posture management of these applications. So we worked with a very large global vendor that has one of the best solutions I've ever seen that specifically focuses on SaaS applications. We asked them to add SmartSuite to that list, and within a week, we had it on our dashboards. We had it fully optimized, and we were able to see exactly every operation that was happening within the platform. We were able to see any drifts from policy configurations that we didn't set forth, and we were able to have a bidirectional mechanism to eliminate that drift, right? So to bring it back into our posture, to bring it back into compliance, through automation. And that was an aha moment. We were doing this with our SaaS applications, financial SaaS applications. Now we're doing this with NoCode. I think that this was the first NoCode solution that they've worked with, and they're fascinated by it. So we see everything in real time, and all of this information is going back to our SIM. I also manage the Security Operations Center. So all this information is going to a single pane of glass, and our SOC analysts are monitoring all these configuration changes. And if there were to be a significant drift or something that operated or broke within the posturing tool, we would be able to capture that as well. So we really see the full picture of how this is being utilized in a secure manner.
Yeah, I think what's important there that I was hoping that you could describe is that Smart Suite has role-based security down to the person, the record, and even the field level. But if somebody grants access above what you feel they should have access to using Smart Suite, you can control that at the corporate level, just like you do any other product that you have in your stack. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's fundamental, right? So role-based access control is fundamental to any organization. But we are operating on a need-to-know basis, right? We don't want the whole bank to see all of our customer base or our intellectual property or what we're working on. Are we going public or grants, bonds? We need certain authorized individuals to be able to access authorized solutions that are specifically for them. So that's really the crux of it. And seeing that drift, right, and being able to change and conform that back into where it needs to be through automation is just, it just takes a lot of the risk away from what we're doing. And it also eases up a lot of time on my analysts, right?
Are you willing to share the name of the product that you're using just for the group to know?
Sure. So for our security posture solution, we use Adaptive Shield. It's a leading edge security posture management, specifically designed for SaaS applications. And then this is all being fed into our SIM, which is Splunk. Splunk is our central repository. It's where we generate alerts. It's where we do all of our parsing configuration. And we have eyes on that 24/7, 365. So anything that happens is automatically captured, alerted on, and action is taken.
Yeah, and I think there's two great products kind of at this event now, NC Scale and the operator product from NoCode Ops that's here that are moving into that space with a lot of us as NoCode vendors as well. But there's also other products that are at the enterprise level that are being they're starting to add no-code products to their list of traditional point solutions that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's fascinating because our whole portfolio of applications are on the dashboard, and now we have Smart Suite there. So when I'm looking at the dashboard, we have our whole Microsoft product line, team, SharePoint, right, and the compliance to baselines, to the CIS standards, right, to frameworks, right, and how it's all mapped, calculated, measured, scored, so we could see how we are, doing against the baselines, and to see a no-code solution there that's being scored, and we can actually go in and understand what needs to be changed, what needs to be configured, and how we update that. I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's just, I just wanted to let everybody know that this is the next generation of what's happening to allow no code to operate at the enterprise level. And it's happening now. It's been talked about for a long time, but it's actually starting to happen for the first time. There's another piece of technology that you have that's pretty fascinating that I think is a little bit ahead of the curve. I think people are talking about it, but I haven't seen an implementation like you have just yet. And that is the way that you're protecting PII information inside of the bank that's before as it's being entered into Smart Suite, you are detecting if that data can actually be entered into a product, and if not, you're pulling up a modal and blocking that data at the source, right? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We brought in a cloud application security broker, or CASB solution, a couple years ago. A CASB, think of it as a filter that all web traffic from the corporate network is being filtered through this CASB for malicious threats, DLP. We actually use exact data match, which means it eliminates false positives because we are hashing all of our confidential data, and we're sending that over to our tenant, which is Netscope, which sits in the cloud. That's the CASB solution. So anything that's going out has to go through this screen, right? And if it's going out via email, it's going through an SMTP proxy, and we're either going to say, this is an authorized individual sending an authorized bank statement to a customer. It's fine. Just needs to be encrypted. So we'll inject a header into that email message, and that'll go out encrypted. Right? That's one of the, that's very, very, very interesting capability that we went through. So we took that same set of rules that we've defined for email, for web forms, for containers, and we applied it to Smart Suite. So anytime there's a post or an upload or a request to bring up any information, that request is going through and it's pulling the data from the network, right, our enterprise network, to the tenant. And the tenant's saying, whoa, 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 whoa. No, this can't be posted here. This is confidential data. This solution's not authorized to have this. So they're going to get a pop-up that's going to say they're in violation of corporate policy, right? It's a very nice pop-up. It's branded, and it's not too worrisome. And we have a button there that if it is a legitimate process, they just haven't recorded that process, that they can go right into our ticketing system and define that process with the right owners. But full protection against data leakage, full protection against information being in the wrong hands, and we substantially mitigated the risk of any of that data being exfiltrated by unauthorized users.
Yeah, I think what's important there for the NoCode community is that we're under a lot of pressure with GDPR and with HIPAA compliance, and it's so easy to enter data into our products. And the larger the organization, the more concern they begin to have. But this particular solution that Jonathan's talking about begins to solve that problem for all of us that's there. And that's why I think the next big wave that we're going to see, maybe even next year at this event, is you're going to see products popping up within the no-code community that are focused on this, in addition to some of the traditional ones that you're using now that are just SaaS-based.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. I think one last question, then we may have time for a few questions if anybody in the audience has anything. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, can a no-code product actually lower the risk profile at the enterprise level? And if you feel that, like, why do you feel that? Right, and this is a value prop for all of us that's selling into large enterprise accounts.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question, and it really solves a lot of problems. As we read, saw, heard over the past couple of months, there's been massive data breaches. They're happening at an unprecedented rate. And that is happening because vendors and sub-processors of your large enterprises are using legacy technologies that have been around for 20, 30 years. The code is not secure. So the threat actors are going directly after the sub-processors And that's how they're exfiltrating this data. So we have legacy data transfer mechanisms that are internet facing, and they have 0-day vulnerabilities. It's a matter of time before it gets popped. With NoCode, you're somewhat eliminating a majority of that risk because you have a self-contained application that's all working with and interacting within itself. Now, you can say, well, what about APIs? What about connectors? That's going to be a problem with anything, right? That's not a no-code challenge. That is a systemic challenge. But there's ways to fix this, right? Review your APIs and make sure that when your connectors or you're connecting with another service, that service is vetted as well. So we don't stop, for instance, our reviews don't start and stop at the application. We want to know where it's hosted. We want to know the interconnections. We want to know all of these interconnected processes and platforms that are working and operating, because that's the only way that we're going to truly understand. And with no-code solutions, you are drastically reducing the amount of those interactive connections. And you're using new code bases, right? And you know, I really wanted to highlight that, you know, the code bases that you're now using, and I know this is no code, but they're very much more secured these days, right? So we're not seeing the vulnerabilities that are getting popped over the past year, over the past 2 years in no code. They don't exist. They're not 20-year-old, you know, good enough, afterthought. This is now a solution that is security focused and it has a security mindset. So I am not having my team deal with patching Smart Suite, right? I don't have to. Microsoft, I do, right? That'll never end. You know, we'll always have Patch Tuesday, and there'll always be a new vulnerability that's exploited. And this is just, you know, the basis of the, you know, of the application.
Yeah, I think what I was wanting, if you're maybe a customer of a no-code platform, to understand is the reason a lot of no-code platforms are building in automations and integrations inside of their core platform, like Smart Suite has about 20 core integrations with products, is because of this, and that larger enterprises want to buy a single platform most of the time that have the core connections that they want. And it's hard for them to sometimes use Zapier or Make or some of the other connectors because they have to go through this whole security review process that he just talked about for another product that has to have a sponsor in the organization. So I think you're going to see more of that for core products around Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, Jira, those types kind of built in.
Yeah.
And you're using Make for, you know, the 4,000 other things, you know, in Zapier that you want to do. But enterprise, we found, has a hard time sometimes purchasing those products along with Smart Suite.
That's right. That's right. But if it's built in, then now we're reviewing one application. Right? And I mean, personally, from my perspective, I'm also a user. So I've introduced this into the security landscape and the cyber risk landscape on how we can make our processes more efficient. So I mean, if anything, I would say this gives a lot of credit to this movement, to no-code, is that as a cybersecurity practitioner, as an information security officer, I'm using this process. I'm using this product, right? So I'm not going to just use anything, right? Because that's basically would not be a good look for me if I had an insecure product. So that's really, I think, the kudos I would give is that if I'm comfortable with it, from an enterprise perspective, from my lens, then I think you have the ability to go out there and really market this to the enterprise level. And these are the questions that you're going to get asked. How are you authenticating? How are you controlling access? How are you encrypting the data? How are you monitoring this? Because that's, listen, security first. My motto, security first, compliance will follow. That's me. Other institutions just want to check the boxes because they have to. So if you don't have answers to those questions and they can't check those boxes, then they're going to say, sorry, we can't do this.
So we're down to the last 15 seconds. So it doesn't look like we're going to be able to ask any questions, but Jonathan is on a panel that's coming up in the next hour. That if you'd want to listen in on that, it's going to give the perspective of some product vendors, from customers, some people like Jonathan, some consultants, kind of all together going through that as well. But Jonathan, I'd like to thank you for your time. We're down to the last second here. I think you provided a lot of great insight into how enterprises are going to continue to consume no-code products.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thank you.